Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Reform Dallas election series. My name is Nancy Rodriguez, and with me is Soraya Santos, and we're going to be your moderators for tonight.
Hello and welcome to the forum. We also want to introduce Millie Dominich, who will be helping us with our timekeeping and technical duties. Reform Dallas is an informal organization of Dallasites committed to honest and transparent local government. You may be one of the almost 13,000 members of our Reform Dallas group. If not, we'd love for you to join us. We also offer independent journalism on the web, and you'll find the city's very best guide to our municipal elections there. Check it out at reformdallas.io. That's reformdallas.io. Reform Dallas does not make candidate endorsements, although our members have opinions like everyone else. The point of these forums is to let the candidates speak to all of us and take their best shot at earning our vote. We want this to be a fair and illuminating experience for everyone here.
Thank you, Soraya. So we have two segments tonight. In the first segment, each candidate gets a short intro. Then we move on to prepared questions that each candidate will answer. For the second segment, we'll open up for audience questions. So stick around for that. Please submit your questions to Millie in the Zoom chat panel anytime, and we'll call on you in the second segment to post your questions to the candidates. One last thing, we published the recorded forums on our website and in the Facebook group. By participating tonight, you expressly give us permission to do that. And with that, here are your candidates for DISD Board of Trustees, District 9. Justin Henry and Elena Sigler have graciously joined us tonight. Welcome. We appreciate you all taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us for this evening. And I just want to say, just take a deep breath and relax and just enjoy this. This is just informal, just for us to get to know you a little better. So please don't stress and have a good time.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm not muted, am I? No, I'm not. Okay, great. All right. Okay, here we go. Candidates, we're going to give you 2 minutes for your answers. Justin Henry, you have 2 minutes to tell us who you are and why we should want to vote for you again.
Can you hear me? Thumbs up? Yes. No? Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, first I want to thank everyone in Reform Dallas for doing these forums. This is my first time participating in it as a trustee, so it's an honor to be in front of everyone to answer questions. My name is Justin Henry. I'm the current school board trustee for District 9. I've been serving on this board for almost 3 years. For the past 2 years, I've had the honor to serve as the president of our school board. I'm doing some particularly challenging times, but I'm standing before you right now, and I always have to start in this place, recognizing that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, and I talk about those wherever I speak. I don't have time to list them all. We all have these types of giants in our lives, but I always like to talk about my grandma Maple, who grew up in Arkansas, who was a sharecropper in Arkansas. I know this group pretty well, but I'll still kind of explain what a sharecropper is. It's someone who works and toils on land, but you never really earn enough money to own the land. So even in the midst of all that, she found opportunity elsewhere. She literally hopped on a boxcar, headed west through Arkansas into East Texas, and that's where she settled and adopted and raised my dad. So from the sharecropping fields to East Texas, pre-civil rights movement, very racist environment, cleaning homes, on and on. I share that story just to let you know that folks like that in my life have provided opportunity for me even to have this opportunity to speak before you. I can go on and talk about my mother and her advocacy for me as well. But I recognize we're all standing on the shoulders of giants to provide opportunities. And that's one of the reasons I serve on this board. The other one is I'm just passionate about education. My whole entire life, I just had a birthday, I'm turned 39. But ever since I was a freshman at the University of Texas, I've been advocating for educational equity, whether it's working for senators on legislative session, whether that's teaching as a middle school teacher, whether that's coming back and working for the ACLU on school to prison pipeline litigation. My passion in life, period, is education equity from my own experiences. And hopefully throughout this conversation, I can share a bit about my background, but I'm deeply passionate about education. I believe that it provides opportunity, the same opportunity my grandma was looking for when she hopped on that boxcar, the same opportunity my mom was trying to give me when she advocated to keep me out of special education and to keep me in the classroom. So I'm deeply passionate about education. I look forward to this forum tonight. Whatever questions you may have, I look forward to learning more about the Reform Dallas members. And I want to end on a note that I got introduced to Reform Dallas from Mr. Waller. And he's not with us now, but he's the one that got me introduced to Reform Dallas. And that conversation, we had a lot of deep conversations. We didn't always agree, but he was always transparent. He was always direct, and he always put high expectations on us elected officials in Dallas. So before we begin, I just want to recognize his impact not only on this organization, but on myself as a leader in the city.
Thank you, Justin. And to clarify for everyone, Stephen Wallard was the founder of Reform Dallas, and we lost him last May very unexpectedly. So thank you, Justin. Ms. Stigler, tell us yourself and why we would want to vote for you. You have 2 minutes.
All right. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be a part of this forum. I really appreciate it. My name is Yelena Sigler, and I am a product of DISD. I am a product of District 9. I went to Charles Rice Elementary. I graduated from Lincoln High School. I went on to go to Texas A&M Commerce, where I obtained 2 degrees, my criminal justice degree and my MBA, and on to law school at Texas Southern University Thurgood Marshall School of Law. I've always known of the village. The village is what raised me. District 9 is what came in and raised me, from the teachers to the people in their community. So therefore, I know how much education means and how much it can make a difference and an impact in a child's life. That's why I chose to come back to Dallas, back to District 9, where I bought my home, and to give back to my community. And I want to be there for our children. Our children deserve so much more. And also, I've taught GED classes, and I've also taught collegiate level classes, not because I had to, because I wanted to, because I know and I've seen the educational divide with our children. And I wanted to make sure that I was there and I was able to let them know that no matter where you come from, no matter what situation or circumstances that you may have encountered in your life, you can still achieve whatever you want to achieve. You're like a tree or any seed that's planted. That's our kids. You know, we have to water them, but also we have to let them know that weeds are coming, but we have to learn to tell them and teach them to pull those weeds up and don't let those weeds choke out their potential in their life and opportunity. And once that's done and they realize that and they see the impact of it, they grow up to be these beautiful trees. We see the tree, but we know the tree is much bigger underneath the ground. That's where the foundation comes into play. And I want to be that foundation for the kids in District 9. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sigler.
Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Let's move on to questions. Here are the ground rules. I'll ask a question and each candidate gets 2 minutes to respond. Again, when your time is up, Micah will stop you. He's our timekeeper. If we feel an answer needs a follow-up, we'll ask it and give the candidate a reasonable amount of time to respond. We're interested in your ideas and to know how you'll approach the job. So let's get started. For this first question, Yelena, you will answer first, followed by Justin, and we will switch up the order for each question.
Okay. The first question will be, again, Ms. Taylor, you will be answering first. It's a roles and responsibilities question. What do you see as the role of a school board trustee? Give an example of things that are not in the school board's purview to be involved with.
Well, the school board trustee has 3 primary functions. That is the hiring and firing of the superintendent, and that's policy and budget. Policy and budget, and hiring and firing the superintendent. What we need to be involved in is our kids. What we do not need to be involved in is situations which people are influencing our decisions that impact our kids. We should not allow that to be situations that come into practice on our board when we're dealing with our kids and making sure that they are given the quality education that they are needing at this moment.
Thank you, Ms. Stigler. Justin?
Yeah, so technically, if you go strictly about board governance, the board has 3 responsibilities. The first one is hire and fire the superintendent. That's one of our only 2 employees. I guess I'll list 5. The first one is hire and fire the superintendent. We have another employer who's the internal auditor. So it's our job to hire and fire that person. That's separate from the district. That's important. The second piece is approve the budget. So the administration kind of composes and proposes the budget. Ultimately, we approve the budget. The third role that we have is policy. That's completely our space, drafting, writing, revising policy. And then the fourth one, I guess fifth one, since I added the auditor, the fifth one that I would add is, we're elected officials. So even though people try to keep us in those 3 lanes, we are elected officials. We do have constituencies, and it's our obligation, in my opinion, to serve those. So being responsible, constituent service, emails, um, community meetings, whatever it might be. We're elected officials, and we should be held accountable by the public for forums like these. So it's not a technical role of a trustee, but I think in order to be a trustee, you need to do constituent service. So those are some of the main primary roles of the school board things that aren't within the role, anything outside of that. So the day-to-day operation of the district, who's principal at what school, who's teacher, what grade, who's getting paid, anything that's dealing with the day-to-day operation of the school, you want to stay out of, not only because it's not governance, but also because it becomes problematic. Like I said before, we have two employees, the superintendent and the chief auditor. I can't hold the superintendent accountable if I'm telling his employees what to do. If I'm saying what principles should be where, or that I don't like this principal, I don't like this teacher, then ultimately I can't hold him accountable, because his defense to me is going to be, well, I didn't want to hire that principal. I did it because you put pressure on me to hire that principal. So it's very important to stay out of that lane, because it undercuts your ability to hold who we need to hold accountable, who is the superintendent of our district. It also can get very problematic because we deal with a lot of money. We just passed the largest bond in the history of DISD.
That is time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Justin. For my next question, Justin, you will be answering first. And this is a question about charter schools. What are your views on charter schools? How do charter schools impact, excuse me, sorry. Damn it, excuse me.
It's fine, take your
I
time.
got it, Soraya. How do
Thank
charter
you.
schools impact public schools in District 9? Justin, we are going to start this time with you.
So, excuse me, Nancy, the first part was how do I feel about charter schools? And then how do they
What are your
impact?
views on charter schools, and how do charter schools impact public schools in District 9?
Yeah, I'm not a supporter of charter schools. Against charter schools. Initially, charter schools were created to create these incubator models where people could try different models, longer school days, different philosophies, etc. What it's shifted into is kind of a corporate structure where they're very aggressively expanding at the detriment of public ISDs. So I'm against charter schools. I'm against the expansion of charter schools. As you know, Nancy, it's not something we can control. They get their grant from the state. But I have worked with council people. The best way to fight charter schools is with the zoning process. Usually when they open a new charter school, they have to go through the zoning process. We're having that issue right now, actually. So to answer the second part of your question, in District 9, there's a charter school wanting to, they're saying they want to move a campus kind of on the border of my district, well, the district that I represent in Trustee Mitchk's district. And me and him and some folks within the community are adamantly against that. And I'm fighting against that and calling our council people about that, because that's really where it needs to stop, is at the zoning commission, but has a very negative impact on our funding. They don't serve kids the way we serve kids, especially if you see in the pandemic. We welcome any kid that comes into our schools. We feed, we do everything we can. We provide counseling services. They don't operate that same way. So they don't operate on the same playing field. I think they're very misguided in their marketing. I think it's misleading. So against charter schools, I would love for a moratorium on them, particularly not even in District 9. It's the worst in the southern sector of Dallas. So Trustee Foreman's district, Trustee Johnson's district, it's so saturated with underperforming. When I say underperforming, and it's my last point before I get cut off, we are outperforming these charter schools. So that's my biggest issue. When we talk about kids and educating kids, we're doing a better job than they are. Yet they keep trying to expand them where they are. They're not better schools in Dallas than DISD. And I have the data to support that.
Thank you, Trustee Henry. Elena?
Yes. In regards to charter schools, I do not support charter schools, but one thing that I do understand, there is a reason why our parents are going to charter schools. So therefore, that's an opportunity for us as a district to see what our weak areas are and what do we need to improve to make sure this is not a situation for our parents, and that our parents, we know that we're targeting these weak areas, because there's a reason why these charter schools are so popular. And we need to go into the community and get our community back involved, the parents and the students. If we want to sit up here and we're saying that the charter schools are coming into the district and these are the issues with them, okay, well, let's go ahead and hit it head on. How can we resolve these issues as a district? Because there's a reason why these charter schools are in our district and they're all over. So we need to make sure we're involving our community with that and getting the input from our parents. And that's the only way we can curtail that. And then also to make our schools even better. So if you ask me, yes, I'm not in, I don't condone and I don't like that there are charter schools, but we need to listen to our parents and see why are they taking their kids out of our schools into charter schools.
Elena, you mentioned that there's a reason why they're putting children in the charter schools. Can you explain what you think that reason might be?
Well, I could give you one example. I talked to a parent who has had experience with charter schools and our public school. And the big issue that this parent had is that her kid had a learning disability, a disability she was trying to get diagnosed. And that kid, they kept telling her within our system, well, let's wait until next year. Let's wait a few months to see what happens. But when the parent, like Mr. Henry said, when you have a parent that's advocating for their kid, like his mom did, then they're going to do what's best for their kid. And that's what she did. She moved her kid over to the charter school who was going to test them from day one to see what the issue was. They did that. And now that child is progressing.
Thank you, Justin. Do you want to comment on that? Lena shared her an example of why she thinks parents are putting kids in charter schools. Do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I have a few. The first one is, I think above all, they're misleading charter schools. I get mailers from charter schools all the time, and free public, free tuition schools. No, you're a public school, you have to be free. They don't talk about their academics, so they market very aggressive. I mean, it's very corporate model. They market very aggressively. They target where they're going to open their schools, and I don't think they're very transparent with their community. They don't tell them that the neighborhood school right across the street from the school that we're building is actually outperforming the school that we're trying to open. They frame everything as if it's almost this elite type of school that's above other schools, and it's not. So I think parents are also making those choices. They are choosing to choose charter schools. They're expanding. I think DIC's addressed that for years. One of the good things about what happened with charter schools is it really put pressure on ISDs to change their model. So we have the Office of Innovation and Transformation. We have STEAM schools opening up in District 9. We had 6 or 7 innovation schools open up in our neighborhood schools in DIC, recognizing that parents want different things. They might want single gender. They want STEAM. They might want personalized learning. They might want. So we have all these different offerings that we're now opening within the district because we recognize that parents were choosing other options, and we want to retain those parents, particularly our neighborhood school. And the last thing, I do agree with Ms. Sigler. We've had severe challenges, documented challenges from the state on our servicing of special needs students. So if the parents that are choosing to leave for that reason, that's something we got to take face on and address. And I think the district has. There's been changes in leadership within that department. We have a long way to go. Preaching the choir, I see Nancy's on here, but I think you attest to it. There's been a lot of changes because it's been so bad, frankly. And identification is one of those things. If there's probably 3 things that I would talk about. It's identification in the special needs area. It's quality of providers. So not only the people that are identifying in the council, but also the teachers, making sure teachers understand the needs of special needs students, and then just quality services. How are we supporting our special needs department? And we have not historically been good at that. We've been bad at it. I'm not gonna say we've not been good. DIC has been bad at it. And we've lost families because of it. So there's no running from that. We got to address it. And we've been addressing it, but I don't want to act like we've done the job.
Thank you, Justin. That's time. All right, we're going to move on to the next question. This is about the proposed suspension ban. 16 organizations have asked DISD to abolish exclusionary disciplinary practices, including both out of school and in-school suspensions. Research has shown that Black students are disciplined at a higher rate and that suspensions play a big role in the school to prison pipeline. First, do you agree that DISD should abolish suspensions completely? And second, how would this work in practice? And I think we're going to start with Ms. Sigler this time.
Well, it has been disproportionately affecting, Black and brown students. And there was a law that was passed that pre-K through second, you cannot suspend them. And there was supposed to be resources put into place in DISD, but those resources haven't been put there yet. So therefore, that's when you go into the situation of bringing people in, having someone sit with the kid, understanding what's going on, because you need the social and emotional learning part, but you also have to understand the environment and form in which some of these kids are coming from. When a kid is acting out, it's for a reason. It is for a reason. And if something is going on where we need to have a system in place. And if we're not, for instance, if we're not suspending them and we have agreed on that, that's law, and then the district said they're going to put these policies in place, but they're not into place, then we're just sitting and we're just talking like there's always been done, been talking points, but no one is putting in the resources that are needed to help these kids.
Thank you, Ms. Stickler. Justin?
Yeah, to answer your question, it's clear across the district, our Black and English language learning students are getting over-disciplined and undereducated, and that has been clear for decades in urban education. So it's definitely an issue. And Ms. Sigler's right. There was a policy that was changed where you can't do a pre-K to second. This is looking at expand beyond that. I am in support of that, but I think you do need to have the supports for our educators and our staff and our principals. So I've already appointed Tiara Cooper, who used to be a community organizer for Faith in Texas. She's a graduate of the great James Madison High School. She grew up in South Dallas. She made some choices and ended up in some place she didn't want to be, but she really understands the impact of these type of exclusionary policies. And she's passionate about it. So she's helping to work with me and some other organizations to have community meetings, because one, we need to inform our community about the pure numbers of it, but also we need to talk to our educators and our principals, because at the end of the day, they're going to be responsible for executing within those buildings. So let's say if you just go cold turkey and say, we're not going to do it at all, you don't provide those services, it makes it very difficult for our educators, because those issues, those underlying issues that Ms. Sigler was describing are still there. The traumas, the difficulties, the social emotional gaps that our students need are still going to be there. But I do disagree. Our district has been very adamant about addressing those issues. In our last budget, you know, I forgot, I think it was 58 million. We hired 57 new folks that are mental health clinicians. So that's either psychiatrists or counselors. It has been a push on the board for about 2 years. I think, you know, Trustee Pinkerton had talked about it, Trustee Mackey had talked about it, other trustees had talked about it, but the board collectively was very passionate about expanding mental health, not only just for our kids, but also for our staff. Our staff can use these resources as well. So, I mean, the last budget was 58 million. It was a huge increase. Don't quote me. I think we doubled the amount of folks we had that were mental health clinicians. We have restorative practices in all of our campuses. My son is, you know, 5-year-old in the district. He does restorative practices in the morning. So the district understands, and we need to continue to invest more money, that you have to address these underlying issues that lead to these behaviors. Because once the behavior happens, it's too late. So I don't know if that was time, but so yes, we definitely need to look at that policy, but we have to provide and continue to provide additional supports for the campus to address the underlying issues. And a lot of you are familiar with ACE and our high performing, our HBC campuses. We actually put more counselors there. We put more APs there because we know the trauma is the highest. We have an index that rates where the trauma is the highest. Lincoln's one of the feeder patterns. Roosevelt's one of the feeder patterns. So those campuses and those feeders in those campuses get additional resources to address these traumas and these underlying issues that we have to get, because you can't.
Justin, we can't hear you.
That was time. So.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
That's probably best to mute me at the end. Thanks.
All right. I want to quickly remind everybody that if you have questions for Justin Henry or Ms. Sigler, please put them in the chat, the Zoom chat, and send them to Millie Domenech. She is one of our co-hosts tonight, and you can use the Zoom chat function to do that. We encourage you to do so.
Okay, so this next question is about TEI. What do you think can be done to improve or change the Teacher Excellence Initiative evaluation system, which is the merit-based pay teacher evaluation system used in DISD? And I think, Justin, you get to answer this one first.
Yeah, so put this in some surveys for some of the groups that have interviewed us, and TEI needs some work, and it's needed some work, and there's continual work. There's an iterative process every year where there's changes being made. This year we detached it from the testing, obviously, because we're in a pandemic, and that's the right thing to do. What I don't like about TEI is it being tied to compensation because of the testing. So if there was one change that I can make, it would be some sort of peer review process. Similar, I'm a lawyer by profession, and we have, you know, I don't say we're peer reviewed, but we're held accountable by our peers. I get my license from the state bar. I can lose my license from the state bar. So I would love the idea of a central administrator that's been an educator, a principal, et cetera, so you can normalize the process, coming in and reviewing the teacher's performance based on indicators, right? How effectively do they deliver direct instruction? How well do they engage? All the teaching strategies that you need, evaluated by peers, and then that be used as an input for compensation. You can have a great teacher, and there can be circumstances where the testing isn't where it needs to be. Some of those circumstances we already know from the district, in standardized testing across the board, that standardized testing, the biggest indicator for your success on standardized testing is the education of your parents or the wealth of your parents. So we know they're fundamentally flawed. And if you look at some of our TI structures, if you look at some magnet schools, you'll see the salaries there. We compensate that other ways in the district, but using test scores to drive compensation is not equitable. I think there's better ways. I think the best way is for educators to peer review. Have an educator that's trained and going in and looking at certain skill sets that teachers should be performing if they're excellent teachers and seeing if that's happening in the classroom, and that's how they get their score. And then that can be tied to compensation. But test scores, and they're not all of it, they're just a percentage, but their majority is problematic because we know standardized testing is not an indicator of your intelligence. It's more of an indicator of your parents and their wealth and or their education, really their education. The higher level of education they have, the more likely you're going to have a high standardized test score.
That's time.
Thank you. Ms. Sigler?
Yes, I think that I really believe, and that the TEI needs to be adjusted, specifically dealing with what we're dealing with now with the pandemic. You have surveys as part of the evaluation system, and you also have test scores. Well, we all know they're not going to be true indicators this next year or probably next couple of years. And so therefore, that has to be an issue. We have to address that with our teachers. Our teachers are what our frontline workers. They're there with our kids every day. And I thank them for that. And just like with any job that you go into, there needs to be an evaluation system, but there needs to be one that's gonna be fair across the board and adjustable. So therefore, our teachers need that support. Also, testing in regards to Mr. Henry brought up data in regards to where you come from, the families, that's the biggest part. Well, I disagree. I'm from District 9, and we didn't always have the most money, or family wasn't the college educated, but I'm here and I have several degrees under my belt. So I don't believe that's the case. I believe the case is actually caring about the students and going in and having the staff trained on dealing with the students in which they are teaching. Have social emotional learning. Let's train our staff. Let's give them that support to deal with the children adequately. So when they do deal with them on that basis, then they know, okay, these kids can learn. It has nothing to do with background. It has nothing to do with money if the right resources are put into place for these students to succeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Going to move on now. This is a special education question. What are the current pressing needs? Someone unmuted? I apologize for that. I thought I unmuted everybody. I thought I muted everybody. Okay. This is a special education question. What are the current pressing needs facing the special education department in DISD, and what plans do you have as a trustee to address those needs and ensure that all current and potential board decisions and policy are inclusive of every student? And for this one, we're going to start with Ms. Stigler.
Well, this is a situation where I know with the students, it's not a situation I know all the details and for the policy, but I am a quick learner. I am teachable. I am willing to work with everyone on the board to make sure everything is done adequately to include our students. One thing that I do know from talking to individuals that are in special education teachers is that the resources are just not there for the special ed children right now. And Mr. Henry, you know how much those resources are needed. Like you stated, your mom was advocated for you. So therefore, those resources are needed and they're not being provided right now by DISD. But if I'm in the situation where I'm elected as your board member, I will make sure I will research those policies, and I will go in and I will learn and I will listen. I will share what I know, and I will learn from those who know additional things on the subject. So I would state that that's the situation. It does need to be addressed from the knowledge that I have, but I'm also willing to go in, work with our current board members, share the knowledge that I have, and also learn from those that are there.
Thank you very much. Mr. Henry? Would you like me to repeat the question, by the way, Justin? I think I requested to unmute you, Justin. There you go. Okay.
No, I got the question. I wanted to back up to the last question because I want to be very clear on this. When I was talking about standardized testing and the achievement on standardized testing, there's not a critique or indictment of any demographic group of folks. It's just the data, period. If you poll people that take the SAT and you disaggregate that data, what it shows us is the biggest indicator of how well you're going to score on the SAT or the LSAT or any standardized test. The biggest indicator is the wealth and the education of your parents. That's the reason I'm in education, because that's fundamentally flawed. I believe, like Ms. Sigler believes, that all of our kids can learn if given the resources. And on this board, I've worked to get resources to our kids. I've bulked up the racial equity policy. I revised the racial equity policy. I ensured that more money is coming to communities that need it the most. That's why we're getting more infrastructure investment money-wise and academics, et cetera, for that very reason. So I agree. If everyone has the same playing field, our kids can thrive and achieve. But what the data tells us, and it's just data, research, go to any school of education and see it, that's what the biggest indicator of standardized testing. It's a bad reflection on society. And that's what we as educators and people passionate about public education have to fix. And the second piece, the three main things that I think we're dealing with the special education, I talked about it earlier, evaluation, identification early. So getting in there early and identifying our kids that have special needs and then effectively supporting them. So identification and evaluation is incredibly important. Quality providers and teachers. So we have our educators that have a lot on their table, but we also have to teach them some of the social and emotional and other understandings to address the underlying issues that Ms. Sigler was describing, which I fully agree upon. So the quality providers and teachers is the second piece that our district has to address. And the third piece is the quality services. So quality instruction, quality support. Ms. Sigler is right. We don't have enough supports in that sector. We are doing a lot, including supporting kids that aren't in DISD schools. If you're within the DISD boundaries and you're at a private school, we still provide services, special needs services. We're required to. So we do that. I just think it's an area that we have a lot of room for growth. So I don't want to say we're not providing service, because we provide services to a lot of special needs students across this district, whether they're in DISD or not, because that's what we do. We just need to be better at it. And those are the three things that I think need to be fixed. And I'm working with the administration. I've had meetings with the administration about how we hold them accountable for that, because again, they run the day-to-day, they propose these changes and other changes. We need to hold them accountable for delivering on this. And if they need more resources, they need to ask, and we need to be able to provide them for them, which we did.
That was time.
Thank you, Justin. Nancy, you're muted. Sorry about that.
Sorry. So the next question has to do with the pandemic. What can the district do to best support students who are struggling both academically and emotionally as we recover from the pandemic? And Justin, I believe you get to answer this one first.
So I'll start now and work backwards. What we can do now is identify the loss, and the district has already done that. They've rolled out a few mitigate learning losses plans. They provided a few calendar options that they wanted to roll out. It was a bit top down, so the board pushed back pretty heavily and asked them to engage parents and educators at the campus to see if they're even willing to do those counter options. Because of that, the amount of schools that are opting in shrunk a lot, but the need is still there. So we need to figure out how, without putting too much pressure on the parents and changing the calendars, how do we provide additional resources to our students, because there is learning gaps. So the district's already looking at, I've talked to Dr. Nelson about this, additional after school programs, additional funding to school. Summer school is going to look a bit different. So there's a lot of things we can do now. And as we build the budget for next year, what are we going to need to do as well? What we've done in the past year, we started with adjusting our goals. So, and I didn't like this at first. I didn't like the idea of lowering our expectations and our goal across the district. But I was actually persuaded in this regard to do so. And it was because when I dropped off my son at school, I was hearing from educators that it was just too much. When I was talking to other educators across our district, it was too much. It was too much for my family. I mean, when the pandemic hit, some people were under so much stress. So it's how can we relieve stress? How can we remove testing? How can we provide more support? So this year, that's what we really focused on doing, removing the amount of tests that they're taking at the campus level, providing more social and emotional supports, not only for the educators and staff, but for the families and the kids as well. We didn't tie the STAR test this year. I mean, there's a lot of things we've done this year to kind of make it less stressful, but going forward, we've got to figure out how do we now re-accelerate and get our kids back on the path we had them before the pandemic, which is going to be a challenge for all urban education cities across the states.
Thank you for that, Justin. Ms. Stigler?
Basically, I've dealt with the situation with the pandemic. I'm part of the village. I'm helping teach my nieces and nephews, great nieces and nephews at home. So I understand what our teachers are doing and what they're up against. And I really appreciate everything that our teachers do because it is not an easy task. What I would say is that, for one, in regards to bridging those academic gaps, we do need to look at options. But for one, as far as expanding the school year, as Mr. Henry stated, that should be an option. And we need to really get into getting the parents and the teachers back involved on the input on what else can be done, because it takes the whole village. It takes the emphasis and it takes the information from the parents and the community and the teachers to make this a viable situation in which we can overcome. Now, in regards to the academic loss, we know this pandemic has set our children back. When it first started back in 2020 or last year, students lost 3 months. Then they have this year. So there was learning loss from March to May to June, basically. Now you building on top of that learning loss with this whole year where everyone's having to adjust. So that's the situation where we need to be able to say, okay, look, TEI, teacher evaluation, this is not going to work this year, and we need to readjust that. Going back to that question, we need to readjust it, not for just this year. We need to be able to do that for the next couple of years and revamp this, because this is not going to take a year to come out of. So also with the social emotional part, we need to make sure, because our students, we've seen it, we've heard it on the news, and particularly not in our school district, but these kids are hurting. These kids are committing suicide. These kids things are happening to them at home that are being caught, unfortunately, on Zoom. So we need to be able to have resources in place day one when we're able to get our kids back into a traditional learning environment. A traditional learning environment that is also safe and for them to go back into. So we need to be looking at these things and addressing them now. Let's be proactive instead of reactive in this situation.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question is about donors. And we're asking, who are your top 3 donors? And Justin, you go first.
We just did our campaign finance reports today. I have well over 70 donors, at least maybe 80. Continue to get more day to day as I make these phone calls. I think my highest, and it's public information, so you can see it on there. I think my highest donor is Lee, which is Leadership for Educational Equity. I think 2 is Educate Dallas, which is a PAC that's established by the Dallas Chamber of Commerce, which I know y'all are familiar with. And I'm not sure who my third one is, actually. I'd guess DKF, Dallas Kids First, if I want to look, but I'd have to verify. But I have over 75 donors. The most important donors to me are folks in our community, my family that I know doesn't have a lot that still gives to me, my line brothers from my fraternity that graduated from DISD. You raise money for campaigns, as Nancy knows very intimately. You sit in rooms, you make phone calls, and you ask people to believe in you, and that's what I ask. You believe in my values, the way I see the world. I don't make any commitments or promises to vote any one way or another. You either like me who I am and how I make decisions, or you don't. But that's how I operate. And so I have my values, the lens that I use to make decisions, my strategic initiatives that are important to me, and that's how I operate. But those are my top donors. It's a long list of donors. Since I've been elected, I've had well over 200 donors from all over the city. I went to UT for undergrad. I taught. I went back to law school. I have various networks of people that believe in me. I've been passionate about this all my adult life. I have frat brothers that knew me at 19, knew that I was passionate about this. They've given to me. I've had law school classmates when I was volunteering for the ACLU and School to Prison Pipeline that know how long I've been passionate and how this really is just who I am. Educators that I taught with, custodians that I taught with in LA, these folks have given to me. And that's important to me because it shows that consistently that this is what I'm about. This is what matters to me and my wife. She's not in this room, but we're both deeply passionate about educational equity. We've been that way a long time because of our own experiences and realizing it's not just our experience. It's really a collective experience of a lot of kids from urban areas and rural areas that didn't have the benefit of wealth or zip code or whatever else they might have had. So it's who I am.
That was the time.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Sigler,
Yes.
who are your top 3 donors?
Okay, my top 3 donors at this point only have one, and that is my father. My father has known me since my day one on this earth, and he knows his child and he supports his child. And my dad is my only donor at this moment. I haven't been in a situation where I felt a need or comfortable to ask individuals for money because life is happening right now. Pandemic is happening. People do not have money to basically buy food for their kids, pay bills. The winter storm just happened. So that has not been a strong point of mine, asking individuals for money, because I know where their money needs to go. So therefore, my father, and if anyone will be willing to, then I would agree graciously, accept it, but just let it be known that any donation, if there's any condition attached to it, I respectfully decline it, because my only reason for running for a school board is to make sure that our kids are afforded a great quality, equitable education.
Thank you.
Apologize. Just give me 1 second. Okay. The next question has to do with public-private partnerships. Would you consider or approve of private partnerships with charter schools or nonprofit organizations in which the private entity would have some level of power over a school? Please clarify specifically on both options. For example, if you support partnerships with nonprofits but not charters, support both, support neither, etc. And we're going to start with Ms. Sigler.
My number one reason, if we're going to support partnerships with a nonprofit or a for-profit, we need to look behind the scenes at the individuals who are funding the nonprofits. We need to also look behind the scenes at the individuals who are funding the for-profits. When you're in the public sector and you're dealing with our kids do not need to be dealt with as a token to get something done for the benefit of someone else. So therefore, in order to, if we were to even partnership, there has to be something that's done on both sides. We need to know who we're working with. We need transparency. Our community deserve it. Our stakeholders deserve it. Our children, our teachers deserve the transparency behind the individuals who are coming in and offering assistance, whether they are a nonprofit or for-profit. So I think that is critical, because those individuals should not if you're coming in and you want to be able to give funds to help our kids, great, but it should not come with conditions. It should come with the condition that it's equitable education for all our children in District 9.
Thank you, Ms. Sigler. Justin?
Yeah, you brought up nightmares when you asked that question. This is something we actually dealt with on our board. I believe my first year on the board. So my short answer to your question, would I support partnerships like this? No. Have I? Yes. And let me tell you why I did. The state legislator had Senate Bill 1882. 1882 provided money to a district, a lot of money per child if you partnered with an entity. The district was going down this path, and we were going to do it with nonprofit. not charter schools. So I didn't support doing it with charter schools. I didn't support doing it with private entities. It was with nonprofits, and it wasn't with all of our schools. It was with specific early learning schools to get additional resources to them. So we were going to get, and it's been a while, I think $1,800 per kid. We retained a lot of the control. There was some, they were able to appoint a person on the board if it happened. And the board supported it. I had to have meetings with the Texas Democratic Party. I had to do a whole listening tour all across the state. I think I sat with Millie at one point, and people that are running for office, explaining that we weren't partnering with charter schools, we weren't partnering with private schools, we weren't giving away our authority. And the main reason we were doing this is because the amount of money we'd be able to get from the state to help us educate our kids. And when you put that extra money, you can have smaller class sizes. So you can have a second grade class with 12 students in it, where we were having 24. So that was the appeal, and the state legislature knew that. That's why they put those requirements in there. But I was willing to make that bargain to shrink our classes to 12. I thought that'd be incredibly beneficial for our kids. What happened was they passed HB 3, House Bill 3, and put a ton of money into public education. Good, that was a good bill. And they took that benefit away. So instead of actually making $1,800 per kid, in a lot of situations, we're losing them. So the early learning department brought it back before the board, and the same board that supported that, not all trustees. Some trustees never supported it from the jump, so let me be clear. But the board acts as a body. The same trustees got rid of that partnership, and we had to vote on every one of those again. So me and Trustee Minchke did a whole tour, advocated on the front end, got burned when HB 3 passed, and then had to go back and kind of with egg on our face say, the incentive's no longer there. We're not getting $1,800 per student. We're not able to shrink the classes, so why would we do this? So no, I would not do it. Now, there's no reason to do it. You don't get any additional funds for it. We're a duly elected board. We should have the authority. If you have an issue with me, you vote me out, or vote any other trustee out. And
thank you, Justin. Ms. Sigler, do you need me to repeat the question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You bet. 1 second.
Is this a new question?
She answered it.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh,
That's okay. That's okay. Well, the next question we're going to ask has to do with the district policies. And the question is, how should the board respond when the district's administration fails to follow board policy? And Ms. Sigler, you have first crack at this question.
okay. So you would like to know how the board should, the board should respond when they don't follow policy.
When the district's administration fails to follow the district's own policies.
Okay. Well, the first thing I want to do is go back to the question real quick about money being accepted. I just want to close on one note with that issue. Our money is not good money. Even if it's going to have a benefit, our money is not good money. That's why you have to know the source of where it's coming from and really research it before you take on that idea of taking money from someone. Now, in regards to school officials not following board policy, there needs to be a procedure in place to actually see why this happened. There needs to be repercussions to that. And there needs to be a situation where those administrators are put in a situation where they have to be held accountable for not following policy. Policy is policy. It's just like the law. You can't run the red light. You run the red light, you get a ticket. If you keep running it, you become a repeat offender, you have other consequences to that. So there needs to be consequences to that. And there also needs to be accountability. And that shouldn't fall between the cracks because our number one priority are our students.
Thank you, Ms. Sigler. Trustee Henry?
Yes. Could you repeat the question, Nancy? Sorry.
Yeah, of course. How should the board respond when the district's administration fails to follow board policy?
Yeah, so the proper way, first you got to know they're doing that. And as you know, sometimes it's hard to know, given all the moving pieces of the administration. But once you identify that, and I'll get to that point in a second, our own employee in the district is the superintendent. So I take the bulk of my concerns to the superintendent and let him know he needs to handle the staff and address these policies. So there's going to be consequences from the board. I think the board does not agree with the administration violating policy. Any board member, I don't think any board member on record would say they're okay with the administration violating policies or any law for that regard. One example I had is when I first got elected to represent District 9, we have a policy for magnet admission. So the policy for magnet admission basically says each high school feeder pattern gets proportionate access to magnet programs. So Ideally, by the policy, every feeder pattern should have kids getting into our magnet programs, Travis, Booker T, Townview, whatever. I asked the administration to show me the data for District 9, for all the district. And when I got elected from District 9 at Travis, that's the middle school magnet school, I had 3 students that met the qualifications to get admitted, and none of them got admitted. I had 0 students from District 9 get admitted, met the qualifications, didn't get admitted. That's a clear violation of policy. Bring that up to the administration. The response I received is, well, some of those schools were A schools, they were coded differently, et cetera, yada, yada, but they fixed it. When you bring it to their attention, they fixed it. I'm not advocating for any specific kid to get in, but some of those kids got into the magnet program as they should have been admitted in the first place. But these are the type of things you have to deal with the administration. If that particular administrator that was head of the magnet program didn't address that, when I brought that to her attention, I was going to take it to the superintendent, because ultimately he's the only person we can hold accountable. And it's a simple conversation. Superintendent Hinojosa, your staff is violating policy. That's against law. That's against your contract. What are you going to do about it? When you can, not that you have to confront him, he doesn't want to do that either. So that's my answer to that question. I shared something about that SB 1882. I don't think I can share with everyone that's on the group, but it's an article that the Dallas Morning News wrote about kind of the 2 steps forward, 3 steps back in regard to SB 1882 partnerships that we took as a board.
Thank you, Justin. And we've been asking pretty serious questions all night. And before we move into the audience portion, I do want to ask one maybe a little bit lighter question. We're going to start with Justin on this one first. So, Justin, who was your favorite teacher as a child and why?
Miss McKissick. I talked about my mom, but I grew up in a neighborhood predominantly Black and brown kids, apartments, duplexes. My mom transferred me across town to another school because I was getting in trouble. I kind of gave you a little bit about that, and she transferred me. She made a choice to transfer me to a school across town. When I was transferred there, I was one of 2 Black kids in the whole grade. The rest of the school was white, 2-story brick homes, etc. I didn't fit in. I got in more trouble there. She knew about that school because it was across the street from our church, Cornerstone Baptist Church. And our pastor's wife taught there, 5th grade. And she taught there because it was convenient. It was right close to the church. So when my mom was advocating for me, when those, teachers sat me down and said I needed to be tested for disability A, B, C, and I shouldn't be in the classroom, my mom advocated for me. It wasn't enough. It wasn't until Miss McKissick, who was their colleague that taught a higher grade, came down and told them the full story of my life, that, I went to church at her church, and that I sat next to my mom on Sundays, and I'm Baptist, so our services can be long, 2-3 hours. And I sat next to my mom, and I wasn't displaying all the behaviors that they were describing. They were trying to push me out of the class for them. So, Miss McKissick, to this day, I consider her one of my heroes. She advocated for me when folks couldn't see the best in me. I still stay in contact with her. So that's my favorite teacher. It is not even close, because but for Miss McKissick, being one of those teachers, quote unquote peers, my mom was a peer too, but they just, for whatever reason, that wasn't enough for them. If it wasn't for her coming down there and bringing the stick and showing them and giving them some cultural awareness of who I was, I wouldn't have stayed in the classroom. I wouldn't have been able to learn. I behaved better when I got to middle school, but I still got in trouble, but I was just able to stay in the classroom and keep learning. And I think that was key. I don't know where I'd be without that. So I'm thankful for Miss McKissick. I thank God for Miss McKissick, but for her, I don't know where I'd be, and my mom. But
well, my follow-up question to you, Justin, was going to be, are you still in touch with her? And you answered that. So thanks. Yeah. I'm glad to hear that you still have that connection with her.
Oh, yeah.
I think teachers play a powerful role in our lives.
Ilana, do you want to go ahead and answer this question? Do you want me to repeat it?
I know exactly what you asked, and I sit up here thinking, because you made this so difficult for me. I mean, I had so many great teachers. I had so many great teachers in DISD, and I'm still friends with some of them on Facebook. So, and they're still teaching. That's how great teachers they are. And to say my age, hey, I'm older, okay? So, I would say, if you just give me Mr. Greer, he's not here anymore. He was a great teacher. He cared about us. He was our choir teacher. He was our music teacher. And to the, and then he ended up being a principal at Percy Anderson, which is no longer open anymore, but he was a principal there. And I would say Mr. Washington, he was my 6th grade math teacher. He didn't teach us regular math. He went and found an old set of pre-algebra math books, and that is what we learned. He went above and beyond because he knew that we were more than what was being put out there for us. I would say my favorite, Miss Arvin, she was my 2nd grade teacher. And then I go to my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Irene Redmond, who is known all over DISD. And she is a great teacher. I remember having her 3rd grade. And I was walking down the hall and I just got glasses. And I was looking down, because I did not like that I had glasses on. And she looked at me, she picked my chin up. She said, baby, don't you ever look down. You're beautiful. You always look up. You are a queen. And I will always remember that. I had great teachers. Even when I go to Lincoln, Miss Towson, she's still at Lincoln teaching. Dr. Lewis loved my principal, loved him. He loved us at Lincoln. He will not let anyone tear us down. He built us up. And he passed away my senior year. And that was the hardest thing for our class. And, it's still to this day, but that was a great man whose shoes, I don't think anybody could ever fill. But I will say I've had so many, that's just a difficult choice. I'm just naming so many people, but just seeing the impact, that it's great teachers in District 9 that had an impact on my life. And that's why I'm here, where I'm at now. I referred to the village earlier. And they are part of the village with my family. And I always consider them family. I love them to death.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sigler.
Thank you. It was great to hear those responses, you guys. All right. So now we're going to move on to our second segment, and we are going to be taking questions from the audience. And you have 2 minutes to answer these questions. There won't be any follow-up. And we have questions. I just saw it. We have great questions from Daniel Wood, Daryl Herbert, and Lori Kirkpatrick. Okay, so our first question is from Daniel Wood. And the question is, what?
Are we letting Daniel go ahead and ask the question?
Oh, Daniel asked it? Okay.
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
I've asked him to unmute and he doesn't. Oh, there you go.
What does SBDM stand for, and what is the value of the requirement by the state?
We'll go ahead and let Justin handle that one first. Do you need us to repeat that, Justin?
Oh, he's muted.
Oh, sorry about that. That's my fault.
SBDM is at site-based decision-making. It's required by state law to have one. Not all campuses have them. Well, don't have active ones. So site-based decision-making team is a collective group of people that support the school. So we have PTAs and PTOs where you should be a parent to be a part of those. SBDM is not like that. SBDMs, you'll have community members that live in the neighborhood. You'll have business leaders that live in the neighborhood, families, parents, whoever wants to get engaged around the school can join the site-based decision-making team. And they have a lot of different roles they can do on the campus. And that's what SBDM is in short.
Thank you, Justin. Ms. Sigler?
Yes, in some, it's the community. And it's the parents, PTA, that's what it is. It's the community. That's in short. And Mr. Justin explained it accurately.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sigler. Next up, we have Daryl Herbert. Daryl, are you unmuted?
Nope. Can you hear me?
There you are. Yep.
Great.
But,
So my question is, school choice is controversial. Being a parent who supports the DISD Choice School Initiative, how will you secure career choice for students without taking them out of their neighborhoods?
and Ms. Sigler, we'll have you go ahead and answer that question first.
Yes. And that is my issue. Short schools, it needs to be available to all schools, even neighborhood schools. We need to put those same resources that we're putting into the choice schools into our neighborhood schools, i.e. like they were when they were learning centers. That way, all kids, there's equitable ability across the board. A kid does not have to go across town or further than their neighborhood school to get the same resources. So therefore, applying those resources into all of our schools and not just choice schools will be a solution to that problem.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sigler. Justin? I apologize, one moment. Go ahead, Justin.
I'm gonna stay off mute. If that does that work? Is
No,
that right?
no worries. That's my fault.
Okay, however you want to do it. Could you repeat the question again? Because I heard something about career in there as well.
Yes, the question was from Daryl Herbert. He said, school choice is controversial. Being a parent who supports the DISD Choice Schools initiative, how will you secure career choice for students without taking them out of their neighborhoods?
Yep. So, okay. So and this is confusing sometimes, our schools of choice, there's two buckets. There's the schools of transformation and the schools of innovation. One of those is you take a neighborhood school and it gets a special program that it applies for. The campus has to get committed to it. The principal has to be committed to it. You have to be bought in, and you apply and you get awarded a grant. And if you do well at first, you can get continual funds, the additional funds that Ms. Sigler was talking about. So I want to be clear, we have choice schools that are neighborhood schools. MLK Arts Academy is one, Henry B. Gonzalez in the Grove is another. We've added 6 or 7 within District 9 since I've been elected trustee. And then you have choice schools. So choice schools are more like Solar Prep for Girls, which is a single gender school. It wasn't a neighborhood school. It's all choice. So people apply from all over the city to try to get into the school. It's not a quintessential neighborhood school. So we have 2 buckets, and we just expanded the amount of innovation schools this year. So there's even more. So we're really focusing on the neighborhood schools, becoming innovation schools and getting additional resources. Now the broader picture, there's 220 schools across the district. Choice schools do get more funds. So there's kind of a patchwork of ways that other schools get more funds. There's ACE schools. We have a lot of ACE schools that get additional funds, which means they have additional assistant principals, additional counselors, additional supports, et cetera. We have HBC schools, which are schools that are predominantly Black students and predominantly English language learners. They also get additional funds for their educators and staff. So different schools get different additional resources based on the underlying need. I do think we should continue to support our neighborhood schools, but there's a kind of a broad approach that the district is taking right now to our various schools, and I do support that. I do support making more neighborhood schools and choice schools. They're still neighborhood schools, but they have these innovative options that parents are looking for that we talked about earlier. I do support ACE getting funds to schools that need it the most. And I do support HBC, getting our teachers and educators that, our students that have predominantly Black or English language learner students more resources, paid more, salaried more. So we have different resources going to different schools for different reasons.
That is time.
I believe both candidates got a chance to answer that question. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Lori, are you there, Lori?
Yes.
Okay.
So good evening. There's been growing concern over standardized testing, particularly this year. Some say it's excessive or improperly used. Others believe it's necessary. Excluding our state STAR test, what, if anything, do you believe DISD needs to do differently as it relates to standardized testing? And if elected, how will you go about implementing that change?
We could start with Justin on that one.
So, good evening, Lori. Standardized testing, comes from the state. So there are requirements that we have to do from the state. What I think we can do locally is remove the frequency and the amount of testing that we do internally. Over the course of the last, 3 years, even before I joined the board, the district has been lessening the amount of tests that are happening at the campus, but I still think there's too many. And we did it again this year whenever we adjusted our goals. So the board I can't say take less tests, but what the board can do is approve different goals, which kind of trickles down through the whole administration, which led to the administration proposing stuff where they're removing, I won't say a lot, but a good amount of tests at the campus level because of the stress that's going on. But again, I mentioned it earlier, I'm just not a big fan of standardized testing. I do know you need to identify where kids are. It needs to be formative. It needs to be informative for the educator, for the principal, for the families. But the frequency of it, the emphasis on it is problematic. I'm going to be very cliche right now, but our campaign logo since we first ran was this flame, and it's because I think education is empowering. It's not filling a bucket. It's lighting the flame within a kid so they can go out and shape the world they want to. And that's not what a standardized test does. A standardized test emphasizes, getting the correct answer. It doesn't emphasize trying and failing and exploring and learning and everything that we think, that I think education should be. So I think we need to identify where our kids are. That's how we know we need to do a mitigating loss program. But the frequency of these tests is such a burden on our system, period, from top to bottom, everyone, including families. I don't like explaining to my daughter and son, I don't like talking about tests at home. Go try your best. We'll learn from your mistakes, have fun. But I don't want you coming home talking about a test. I don't talk to her that way, obviously, but so that's how I feel about that, Laura. There needs to be work done. I think this is a good time because we're doing it anyways because of the pandemic to explore what's needed, truly needed, and what's not, to inform us on where our kids are and where our educators are, because we use those tests also to see how effective our educators are, which is important because we want our best educators in front of the kids that need it the most. That's what our ACE program does. So complex. Laura, if you had a solution, it'd be great, but it's something that needs to be worked on.
Thank you, Justin. Ms. Sigler, do you want me to repeat the question for you?
She's muted.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Ms. Sigler, can I repeat the question for you?
No, I have a question. Thank you. Basically, what I would say in sum, our students are more than a test. Tests do not measure the dedication that the teachers and the support that they bring in. Tests does not measure the struggle that the students are dealing with. No, a test is essentially data. And when you're data driven, then that's all you're looking at. You're not looking at the quality of what is actually going on. The tests are data driven, which we have already stated are subjective, and they're not on the basis of basically evaluating our kids on the same level. And as Mr. Henry emphasized, of course, he stated with campaign empowering students. Yes, we need to empower them, but we need to give them the resources to empower them. That's what we need. That's where we're lacking in our district. We are not providing those resources. We can spit out the words empower all day, but are we actually putting the work in it to make sure that our students are getting what they're needing? And also, in regards to go back, with the charter school, if these opportunities were offered in our neighborhood schools, then we can kind of cut that problem in half and wouldn't have that issue. If they were offered in our neighborhood schools, there shouldn't be this money going here or there. If you're able to do it and want to be equitable across the board, that's going to be the case. Also, tests should not be used as a pass or fail for students. There's a measurement. It needs to be a measurement tool. You need to understand, especially in the situation we're dealing with the pandemic right now, we need to be able to gauge the students on where they're learning, where they're falling short. So I definitely think it needs to be a measurement tool when you're testing all the time, just like adults. When you keep testing us and we keep doing stuff all the time in the same test, in the same situation, we get kind of bored with that too. We get bored because we get tested over and over again on the same thing. At our job, we see the same thing over and over again. That's how kids are. We need to be able to refresh that. If they always think they're coming to school to be tested, then they tune out. So it needs to be used as a measurement tool, but not as a pass and fail option. Like I stated, our kids are more than a test.
That is time. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question we have is from Leticia Gomez. And we are very inclusive here at Reform Dallas. So, señora Gomez, si necesita hacer la pregunta en español, yo le puedo traducir. So I'll translate if Ms. Gomez is more comfortable.
Okay, let me try, okay?
Okay.
This is my question. How do you, Justin and the lady, going to integrate the Spanish speakers?
And we'll start with Ms. Sigler on that one. Could you understand the question, Ms. Sigler?
She wants to know how we're going to integrate the Spanish speakers within the school. Is that her question?
Señora Gomez?
Señora Gomez.
I just unmuted.
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah, it's because I think I'm asked many times Dallas ISD needs to serve, be serve like an equality, but I think the ISD don't decide to do everything bilingual, and I send many times to Justin a message asking to do translation and have more people on translation services. And this is my question, because when I'm sent some concern, nobody answer me, and I'm very concerned if why do you call like school representatives? Because I think I'm very confused tonight, because I think it's not school representatives. I think the school board serve to the Mr. Hinojosa now, the superintendent, not to the community. Or this is my field, because I'm speak Spanish and I'm speak very bad English. And this is my question. How do you going to integrate the Spanish speakers community?
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to apologize to you, because you should never feel like that in your own community and schools, as far as getting in contact with anyone or having someone that's going to be able to translate for you. So I understand your frustration there, and I'm apologize for that. That should never happen. The community needs to be heard and fully heard and understood. What I would do is go to each school within the district, because each school has their own personality. Like everyone on this call has their own personality. So therefore, I will not approach Ms. Gomez the same way I approach Ms. Rodriguez or Mr. Henry. You have to understand your schools. So you go to your schools, you say, okay, this situation is happening. You need to get with each school and see, okay, your bilingual, you need to have your bilingual education. What are you doing to make sure there's translators here? What are we not doing to help you to make sure that you have people here to help you with your students and their parents in regards to translating for them? What are you guys needing? What are you doing now? And what do you need from us? That's something I would do on an individual basis. And if you were to call me and you would have that situation, then I'll try my best and I will make sure that you get your answers and the responses that you need. But that was one thing that I would do. Each school within District 9, I will sit down, talk to the administration and say, what are you doing? And what do you need more help from us as board members to help you to make sure you're getting that done, to make sure that you're accommodating all of your parents and your population and your community that's within your school.
Thank you, Ms. Sigler. Trustee Henry?
Yeah, first, I agree with that last point, Ms. Sigler. When I was first elected, this is actually what I did. I visited every one of the DISD schools in District 9, from Mesquite to Pleasant Grove, almost to Mesquite, Pleasant Grove, sunny South Dallas, East Dallas, downtown, and had those conversations with the principal. My main ask was, how can I support you as a trustee, knowing that I can't do the day-to-day operation? So you can ask any of the principals in District 9 and they'll tell you. They'll also tell you it's the first time that it happened in a while. So I do want to answer that question. And Ms. Lete, I'm going to take issue with you saying you have very bad English. Su inglés es más mejor que mi español. So your English is fine. It's very difficult to speak another language. What I will say as a trustee, before I was president of the board, and I'm not going to take full credit, but me and Trustee Garcia worked to make sure that our board meetings were translated into Spanish. Before I was president of the board, it was only in English. We were given headphones if someone needed to speak in Spanish. Now, every board meeting and briefing since I've been president of the board, we have translators in a room, and they rotate so they're not overwhelmed, and they translate the meetings. All of our board briefing and meetings and audit committee meetings are now also in Spanish. So if you dial into the number, you can get it in Spanish. And that's through me and Trustee Garcia's leadership on the board, primed by Leti. Leti's the one who brought that to my attention. She's not playing when she says she reaches out to me. She does. She reached out to me with frustration. Me and Trustee Garcia had a conversation with the Dr. Hinojosa, whose first language is Spanish, and asked him, why is this not so? And he changed it. The same thing with social media. And actually, Barry, I don't know if he's on this call, he's pressed me all the time about this. Justin, why does the social media for DISD's Facebook not mirror the Spanish one? Why is information on the English one and not the Spanish one? That's changed. It's now mirrored. Barry's the one that told me about that. I asked the administration to change that, but for Barry, that doesn't happen. But I also played a role in that. So I fully appreciate that. There's more issues. I think the big one we have right now is interpreters. Going back to special need, there's not enough. If you think about going into an intimidating special needs art or IEP, whatever meeting, and not being able to speak your first language is a very difficult and stressful situation. That is something I need to improve and the board needs to improve on, the administration needs to improve on. We try to have everything in both languages. If you go to Joseph J. Rhodes, Twitter or Facebook or whatever they send out, it's now in English and Spanish. And part of that's because it's the right thing to do. But if you think about DISD, we have more English language learners, Spanish speaking English language learners in DISD than El Paso ISD has, than San Antonio ISD has. Spanish speaking is by far the main language in our district. So it's almost, if anything, it should be flipped the other way at this point because there's so many Spanish speakers. So Letty, if you reach out to me, I need to do better. We'll continue to work on it, but I do want to know we have made progress. And I think the thing I'm most proud of is our meetings. All of our meetings are now, you can watch it live in English or you can watch it live in Spanish. And that opened up the
Thank you so much, Justin.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's all the questions we have for this evening, and that concludes the District 9 Candidate Forum for Reform Dallas.